Hello and welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. I'm very pleased to welcome my guest today, Andrew Kojima, otherwise known as Koj, and best known for promoting Japanese food and drink as a chef, teacher and author. After graduating in classics from the University of Oxford, Koj stumbled onto the treadmill into finance, where he spent 10 years, primarily as an investment research analyst. Eventually in 2012, he seized the opportunity to turn his passion into his profession. After reaching the final of MasterChef, he undertook a fast-track training programme in Michelin-starred kitchens across the UK and Europe before specialising in the cuisine of his father's heritage. As a private chef, he's cooked for the late Queen, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Redmayne, among many other celebrities. His restaurant won awards and critical acclaim with its pioneering approach to Japanese dining. And his book, No Sushi, was published in 2020. Welcome, Koj.
Thank you, Philip. Lovely to be here.
So let's start by asking you, when did you first discover your passion for cooking?
I would have been about 10. My mum was a teacher, so she had the benefit of these lovely long holidays that she could spend with us. And I was the eldest of 4 children. And I think probably what started for her was someone to help with chopping things up and stuff like that when my dad was at work and we were on holiday, became something I actually quite enjoyed. The first thing she taught me to cook was spaghetti bolognese, and so started with the onions, and no doubt as a 10-year-old, but they made me cry, and then the carrots, and putting all those bits and pieces together, then browning the meat and adding the herbs in, and then the sauces. And I think probably that just appealed to me as a child, that sort of that sense of alchemy, but then having something that you could eat.
Talking about when you first left university and the career you decided to take, so one might assume from that you would have looked at cooking as a career, but tell me about your experience post university.
I think I did look at cooking, but through university. I mean, we're sitting here in Oxford, and so it's over 20 years ago since I was having those thoughts, and I came out with a classics degree, which is wonderfully broad. You can be a teacher, a lawyer, all sorts of things. There's very few chefs that I know that have done classics. I do know a few. I haven't met them all yet, but I know a few. I think, and I discussed with my parents, but there were 2 things happening there. One was that my mother grew up in a hotel. She was the eldest child. A lot of the parenting fell to her as the eldest child of also 4 children, because as you can imagine, the life of husband and wife running a hotel is pretty full on. So I think she wanted to steer me away from a life in hospitality because she'd been at the brunt of it. And then I suppose the other thing that was forming my thought processes was the influence of big companies on recruitment drives at university. They are big machines. They need graduates coming in to do the grunt work. So, and of course, a lot of my friends were going that route. So there was the element of being pushed away from hospitality by my mum and being drawn into these big companies,
And so how long did you do that for?
I spent about 2.5 years in my first job, which was at UBS Investment Bank, and those 2.5 years, I mean, even the time, it felt like 10. We were in at work at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, and the senior guys, the guys with families and children, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they were all disappearing at relatively normal time, maybe 6, 7 o'clock. But the young guys would stay there because they dump a pile of paperwork to churn through for the next few hours. So it was very typical for me to do 8 till midnight at the very least, and there were several mornings where I was getting in a taxi at 2 o'clock in the morning. And there were a few nights that I just didn't go home. I stayed in the office all night. And that's when I started to think, am I doing the right thing? And then started to tell my parents about what it was. And they were like, oh, that's terrible. You're working far too hard. You've got to leave that job. It's like, hang on a minute, you like a year ago you were telling me this is the right path, it's a good job, it's good salary, good prospects, and then they were, then they saw the reality of it, and they were giving me sort of conflicting messages. So that made me think as well, made me reconsider.
So when did you realise that finance may not be living up to your expectations?
I was in a business that was very deal driven. It wasn't quite like the raw daytime adrenaline of the traders and the trading floor. It was more like projects and then leading up to a big deal. So everything would be secret, and then we'd announce it to the press. And that was very exciting, especially those last few days where you realised you were going to put something that was going to be on the front of the FT. That was really exciting, and that was when adrenaline came. And I remember doing a deal where there was no adrenaline, and I was like, sober.
Was that your turning point? Was that the point you realised?
I think that was when I started to look around me and go, okay, I'm not sure I want to follow all of these guys and down that route, and I need to break away now. And then I went on a holiday with some friends, and one of them was doing investment management, and she sold it to me. She said, the work's it's already more value added at a junior level. You're doing more thinking work, and it's better hours. And I applied. I sent a sort of speculative covering letter in, and I was lucky with timings. They were looking to add to their sort of group of research analysts.
And how long did you do that for?
I did that for 5 years. So that clearly was a much better environment for me. It was more academic, and much less adrenaline and deal flow based. Much less. In fact, not at all. In fact, quite the opposite. We, as investors, we almost had an allergic reaction when there was a deal, because it usually meant that was bad for shareholder value, often because it was driven by egomaniac. And I think that also coincided with another period of my life, which was mid to late 20s into early 30s. I felt more settled, and although my girlfriend at the time was just she was still in Oxford training as a medical student, so she obviously had a longer student experience, and I was working, so we weren't living together. But in that job, I decided I was going to ask her to marry me, and that she said yes. So that was a happy period. And
so what happened then? What happened to you making a decision perhaps to change the field of work that you were in?
Well, flippantly, I always point backwards towards a team offsite that we did at Redmayne, Le Manoir Quatre Saisons, and it was great. It was a great offsite. I think it would have been, the weather was good anyway, and so obviously he was showing off his beautiful garden, lovely house, nice bedrooms, and then our activity was to go into his cookery school. Then we moved in together, and so we had more dinner parties. So I was growing to love cooking more and more, because I had more time to do it, because I had more friends who appreciated it and wanted to do dinner parties, either come to us or we would go to them. And so when I went on this cookery course at Redmayne, Le Manoir Quatre Saisons, I paired up with a lovely lady called Ikigai, and we won. Redmayne Blanc and his team decided that we'd done the best, and I always looked to that, and I say to my boss, that was one turning point where I was like, I really love this, and I really want to do more of it.
So how did this affect your decision process?
When I realised how much time I was spending thinking about the next dinner party, all the planning that went into that, the menus, reading my recipe books, picking out which I was going to cook, organising the shopping, all that kind of stuff. I was spending a lot of time doing that, and I was working towards this goal of hosting a really nice dinner party and getting really good feedback. And one of the main differences that I've noticed in cooking and I realised it then as well. Compared to work and the feedback system at work, maybe changing. I've been out of the corporate world for 10 years, but when I was there, feedback was, well, in banking, it was pretty much once a year, and it came just before your bonus.
And I guess there's almost a physiological reaction to somebody saying, you've done well, or that was great food, in terms of your mood, and just generally, everybody likes to get good feedback.
Absolutely, yeah. Everyone, I think, most people thrive on good feedback. And the great thing about food and cooking is that you can pretty much action any constructive criticism that is. You can do that instantly, and you can process it instantly, and you can see how you're going to improve on that situation.
So what did you do next then? How did you move from enjoying cooking for your friends and dinner parties to perhaps moving out of the job that you were doing?
There were a few more catalysts that needed to happen as well, I think. For one was having our first child. That obviously changes things dramatically in terms of how you look at your career and your earnings profile, what you need to, what you're expecting, and what your partner's expecting of you. I think the other thing that was happening was when I cooked for friends, they were saying, you're pretty good at this. Have you ever thought about applying to MasterChef? And maybe that was because people were suggesting I did it, and maybe it's because I had more time in the evenings and I could watch a bit of evening television. But I remember watching MasterChef, and it had gone from this very studio-based product with Lloyd Webber, effectively judging people like me on their dinner party food, to something much, much bigger budget, higher octane, in restaurants, doing stuff that, pushing the boundaries of any sort of home cooks far beyond what they're used to, in the name of entertainment, obviously. And also, you saw a bigger budget in terms of now they're going to India. I remember watching the final, I think, of 2009, 2010. It's a couple of series before I was on, where they went to India, and they were running around, sweating and, cooking food that was unusual to them. And I loved it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, so when people said, do you want to apply to MasterChef? I thought about it, and I did it.
So was this a pivotal point? What else were you considering?
MasterChef is probably one of them. So I applied there, and then I had a contingency list of various different things. Most, 80-90% of them were related to food. I remember one of them was I'd always wanted to learn to butcher, and so I was like, well, I'm going to go and be an apprentice in butcher's fair, not for very long, but just to learn the basics. So one of them was to start a food blog, and to do that side of things, so less practical, more writing, and more what I was doing as a research analyst, reading, learning, thinking, and writing. So I did that when my son was born as well.
So was it more of a blended approach initially? So you were continuing with what you were doing because that was assuming bringing you in an income, a steady income, but then you started to explore alternatives, as you just explained, blogs and entering MasterChef. Did you think at that point that it could work, that you might be able to transfer your everyday work life from what you were doing to fully into chefing?
Frankly, no. Because for one, my wife wasn't very happy about it. She had agreed to marry a young banker or investor who was earning a good London salary in finance, and she always remembers the day when I'd said to her that I wanted to become a chef, and she went for a very long run, and I think she'd meant to go out for an hour just to clear her head a bit, but in the end I think she went for 4 hours, and I started getting worried, and she just she started running, and then she just went for a very, very long walk, for her to sort of process what I just said. So there was that, and that, obviously in my early 20s, thinking about career, it was all about my parents, but by my early 30s, it was all about my wife. So that was one big thing that I had to sort of think about. But yes, there was this interim period where I was doing basically what I was doing before, but also had the free time to do a few other things. But no, I didn't realistically think I can go and be a chef because, I mean, London chefs are still not paid very well. They've got, I don't know how some of the youngsters do it, probably by not living in London, to be honest, and they must have to commute a long way. So the idea of going to that kind of salary with a young child, I couldn't really see it working.
So what happened next then?
Well, I applied to MasterChef. I think one of the other things that was on my list, apart from the food blog and being a butcher's apprentice, was to learn Japanese, because I'd always felt guilty that I'd never learned Japanese. So I applied to a course at SOAS, just off Russell Square, I think it is. And so I then had another place to work, and that was, suddenly there I was, early 30s, surrounded by students and reliving a student life and culture. And I remember sitting in the common room, just having a cup of tea one day, waiting for my Japanese lessons. And there was the year there was a big earthquake in Japan. It was also the year that the Syrian war kicked off. I think it was the year that Gaddafi was assassinated, and it felt really lively, and all the students were watching it. And so I had all these stimuli shaking up my brain and making me think, right, what's next? It was an online form. I don't know, 7 questions or something like that. Where did you learn to cook? Who's your biggest cooking influence? That kind of thing. And a few months later, or maybe weeks, it was. One of the researchers had read my application, phoned up, and did a follow up on the telephone. So that process took a while. That would have been March, April when MasterChef went out. I saw it on TV. They appealed for the next round of candidates. And over that spring and summer, there were more and more interviews that sort of filtered down from thousands down to hundreds, and then eventually I think there were 24 in the studio when we started. But then that was a 6-month period, and then the film was 3 months. So it was pretty much a whole year of trying to run this parallel life of, yes, be a good husband, be a good dad to a tiny baby, earn some money, try and do that, but also indulge your whatever you would call it, the things that you want to do.
Yep, your own aspirations. And how did you manage that? I mean, what advice would you give to somebody trying to manage all of those things at the same time?
I guess ultimately you have to be disciplined, because you've got to make sure you set aside you allocate the right amount of time to the right projects. You could spend 4 days a week writing a food blog that doesn't generate any income, where you spend 4 days a week writing research that you get paid for. So I remember being quite rigid about setting up my week, and I was lucky. My wife by that stage was behind me, and she was helping me sort of manage that process, because you suddenly come out of a corporate world where everything's managed very closely day to day. And the benefit of it, obviously, when you come out of it, is you gain so much free time, because I'm sure I've got a friend who's written a book called Diary Detox, and he goes out telling companies how much time they're wasting through, pointless meetings and phone calling and that kind of stuff. So I used that freed up time to do the things that I wanted to do, which were writing about food blogs, or even I set aside a little budget to go to different restaurants, to no longer just to go and eat, but actually to critically write about it. At that stage, I wasn't necessarily thinking just about being a chef. I was exploring lots of options in the food world.
But you managed your time. So you had a plan.
Yeah.
And I guess that was driven by the real desire to partake in these different, evaluate different options. And I guess, ultimately, were you looking at that point to transition out of the research and into whatever it might be? But as long as was the driver to do something around food generally, or were you thinking, well, I could just run this in parallel and see how it goes?
Yeah, I think at that stage, before MasterChef, it was very much, I can still do what I was doing. I can have my cake and eat it effectively. I can still do what I was earning roughly, but if I can now set aside a little bit of time to do other things that I wanted to do. And obviously that changed when you've got a baby as well, because suddenly that sucks up a huge amount of time. Especially your first child, you waste inverted commas, waste time just looking at them. It was a way that was acceptable to me and to my wife to do what I was doing, but also to indulge what I wanted to do as well, and to tick a few of those boxes that I could see. If I don't do these now, and if I don't address them, I may be 10, 20 years down the line and go, oh, I missed that opportunity to do that. So, amongst other things, I had a friend who had a restaurant, so I said to him, can I have a experience in a real kitchen, not just a home kitchen? So I went and did that. I did a lot of different things. But MasterChef was finally gave me the confidence to make the full leap and turn it completely full time.
Did you have any reservations at any time that you're perhaps doing the wrong thing, or perhaps you should just stick with the research analysis?
When we moved out of London, we moved into a new house, but it was an old house. We had huge bills to pay. And, in many respects, it was completely the wrong time to be changing career and going to a career where I was completely on my own. Even if I'd gone into a full-time career as a chef, I'd have had to start really at the low levels. I wouldn't have been anywhere near the salary that I was as an office job, let alone be able to, effectively, create a new home, do a refurbishment, all those kind of things that many parents would, have to do at some point. And that was a stressful point, having made the decision.
So you had your experience on MasterChef, were you a finalist? How did that then impact the next stage of your life?
So there was 6 months application and getting into it, 3 months filming, and then probably about 3 to 4 months of actually being on air and post edit and all that kind of stuff. So it really was a full 12 months before I could make that final decision. Right, I've done well in this to make it a platform from which to launch a full-time career.
What point did you decide to then open your own restaurant?
We moved out of London in 2013, and in 2015, that's when I started to play around with it, doing a few pop-ups and guest nights and getting a feel for cooking in public and rather than private cooking in someone's house, cooking for a small dinner party. So that was 2015 was my sort of first exposure to that. And then 2016 was when I first committed to a sort of longer term pop-up. So it was 2 or 3 years. Looking back, and now I feel it wasn't that long, but it felt like a long time at the time. I suppose partly because there were external factors. There were young kids in the house. There was a refurbishment project that took 6 months. I was in a new area, so I was having to find new clients. So I was adjusting suddenly to fully working on my own rather than working as part of a bigger organisation.
This might be a silly question, but how did you feel once you'd realised that now your full-time job or your career was focused on food and cooking for other people and taking what was a hobby, cooking for people, for having dinner parties for your friends, to now something which was something you were being paid for and was you were now a chef?
Well, to use all those cliches of roller coasters and whirlwinds and stuff, genuinely it was that first year was a complete whirlwind. Obviously, suddenly you go from complete anonymity into, millions of people know what your face looked like. To tell a vaguely amusing anecdote, I went to McDonald's one day and got told off for being there. You should be here. You're a chef. I was like, well, I'm hungry and it's convenient and it's cheap. So here I am. But the truth is that first year, not only you sort of have to deal with, good stuff on Twitter, but plenty of nasty stuff as well. There's that to deal with. Then, in my case, so then you leave your old job and you readjust to suddenly, that was taking up a lot of your time. Now it's not. Having to become really good at marketing yourself, setting up a new business. And in my case that year, 2012, well, there was MasterChef came out in March. The London Olympics were that summer. There was a lot going on. I was working at a Japanese restaurant for a little bit of that time. My daughter was born in August. My dad died that December, and we bought our house literally the next day. In fact, in December, we'd known he'd been ill. He was ill all the way through MasterChef, actually, with cancer, and he died. He very luckily, I feel incredibly fortunate. He stayed alive long enough to see me on there. He even went and bought us off, and he splashed out a new TV so you could watch it on a bigger screen. And you look back and go, how the hell did I survive? Well, you just did, didn't you? Like, you just did. But yes, it was a very, very challenging year. But I guess because of all those things that happened, I didn't have much time to think about it. I just had to get my head down and do it.
If you're giving advice to other people who are perhaps in a similar situation, aren't very happy with what they're doing in life, perhaps they don't feel they're doing what they were naturally born to do, what advice would you give those people looking to make that transition? Because I think a lot of people, it's quite scary. What advice would you give those people?
I would advise them to... There are times in life where you have to listen to your head, and there are times where you listen to your heart. And I think you know instinctively which is which. And in my case, it was listening to my heart. My heart was telling me, this is something you love. This is something you can do. And there's a Japanese expression, Ikigai. In fact, there's a book called Ikigai, but Ikigai means your meaning in life. And, there's certain things that produce your meaning in life. Is it something you're good at? Is it something you can make money from? Is it something the world needs? And if you sit happily in the Venn diagram of all those things, you will find your meaning in life, your Ikigai. And I think I feel lucky that I found my meaning in life. Now, don't get me wrong, being a chef is not the most remunerative thing, but it makes enough money to suit my lifestyle. But, frankly, if I'd wanted to be super wealthy and have 3 houses and a yacht, I maybe would have stayed in banking. But I followed my heart, and if you follow your heart and you're scared of leaving. Now, I've spoken to lots of people who've made career shifts, and as much as it's sometimes good luck, it's also the bad luck when you look back. And I've got a friend called Danny who's a graphic designer now, but he got very unhealthy, but that was his trigger to think that I'm in the wrong job. And it was psychosomatic, it was everything. It was stress, all that kind of stuff, but it manifested itself in physical ill health. And for me, there were things that went wrong that I didn't, I didn't necessarily, my dad being sick and lots of things that shook me up to make me think, am I doing the right thing? As well as the good luck thing, whether that's, frankly, it was good luck that I even got through to MasterChef. The 24,000 people applied. I could easily have been in the first cut. They picked it up and went, oh, this guy filled it out while he was bored on a Friday afternoon, straight in the bin. But they picked up the phone to me. So now, arguably, I probably put a lot of time and effort into that application form, and I thought long and hard and rewrote and edited before I hit send. But so maybe it wasn't all luck, but there must have been a degree of luck.
So you're living proof, really, that grit and determination with talent, but also a little bit of luck can get you.
And I think if you follow your heart and you make it hard for yourself, you will make it come good. And even if that means, doing it for a while and actually saying, do you know what? I gave it a go. I gave it a shot. I've still, I haven't lost the skills that I acquired before. I can go back to that. Don't necessarily have to go back to the same job or the same company, but, I can now see, having done a different career, what transferable skills I've learned, on my own, not through training as part of an organization, and what makes me tick and what makes me good at what I do, and therefore what I might be good at. So I think, the advice for me is trust your instinct, talk to people, and don't worry about getting conflicting advice, because you will, like I say, you will wake up one day knowing roughly where you stand.
And better die trying than
definitely
die of regret for not having enjoyed it.
Yeah, having done it, I'm very much an advocate of that approach to life.
And what's next?
So I'm now in this stage where I've got a lot of things that I can do, and if I roll the clock back 10 years, I was facing them, thinking that I had to choose one of them. Now, as it turns out, it doesn't matter which one you choose. You can start off as a food writer, in a huge competitive world, frankly not earning very much money, and you do that well for a few years, 5 years, 10 years, and suddenly you're a critical MasterChef and you're increasing your profile and your earnings profile as well. Or you can do it the other way and become a chef, which is what ultimately I did. And then by being a chef, you can write a book, and then you can teach, and then you can work as a consultant. And I gave a talk at a school recently, and it was a careers talk, and that was the main message of that, which was like, I'm a chef.
So, your career is not a continuous path.
No, absolutely not. And, I think there must be thousands, millions of people who just weren't in the right place when they were, when they chose their GCSEs, when they chose their A-levels, all of which funnels you down into like different paths. So I'd say that to anyone that, any stage of life, whether they're children choosing careers or graduates age 20 or people in their 30s to 40s like me, it's all the end of the road. There's so much to do, so many choices.
That's good to hear. Tell me about your book.
Well, the book was originally written. I'd always in my head wanted to write a book, and not necessarily a food book, actually. But when I had the restaurant, it sort of made sense. This is where did you, put some of the stories I've been talking to you about. How did you come into cooking? How did you set up the restaurant? What did you want to achieve out of the restaurant? And what did you achieve with the restaurant? What kind of food were you cooking? It is literally a manuscript of your life so far. And if you want to write another recipe book further down the line, it's not necessarily a recipe book, but only about half of it's recipes. And even of that, every single recipe's got a picture, because I've got so many books. So I think it's well documented, and I'm sure it rings true of many people. They've got all these cookery books, but they've only cooked 10% of them. Partly that's because there's no visual imagery. So me and my publisher decided every single thing must have a picture.
Brilliant. Well, the book, we'll put a link to the book on the website.
Yeah, thanks. It's on my website. Yeah.
So, Coach, I'd just like to say thank you. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Midlife Men. If you'd like more information about this episode, then you can find it on the website www.mid-lifemen.com. If you've got any feedback, or if you would like to suggest any topics that you'd like to see covered, or indeed if you've got a story you'd like to share with us, then please contact me on email midlifemen01@gmail.com. Thank you, and see you next time.